Good evening, everyone. I'm the storyteller, and I am here to help you sleep better with true horror stories. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like my video. I would love to know where you are from and what time you're watching this video. So please leave a comment to let me know, and I will draw from that experience to tell even better stories. When you are ready, feel free to relax. During my sophomore year in college, I received an invitation to a massive party hosted by a senior in law school at his residence. A wet t-shirt contest, couples entwined in corners, and all the antics you might envision. Yet, it wasn't the revelry that etched this party into my memory. Rather, it was something far less enjoyable. And quite a bit more malb this happened in 2014. I was 19 years old at the time. That night, a guy named Michael threw a big party at his beach house. This guy came from family with a lot of money, so it's no wonder he was very popular in college. But it wasn't just his economic position that made him popular, it was the fact that he had a very wild lifestyle and would throw the house out the window. When it came to partying, this guy was about to graduate, and according to him, this was going to be his going-away party from college. So I had every intention of making a grand entrance. The invitation caught me off guard. I was hardly the most popular person around, and my scholarship meant I was short on funds. Yet, I figure my connection to Eric, who was friend with Michael's brother, had something to do with it. As I stepped into the house, the first sight that greeted me was the host, perched on a bar in the living room, dancing to the lively beats of reggaeton, surrounded by a group of stunning girls. It was around 10 o'clock at night, and Michael appeared to be quite intoxicated. I found myself in a corner of the room, near a large keg of beer, where an overweight man was drinking while standing on his head, supported by two others holding his legs. Coming from a small town, I had never been the most popular kid in school, nor did I attend many parties, so this scene was entirely foreign to me. I must admit, I felt a bit overwhelmed at first, but after a couple of beers, the atmosphere began to shift, to feel lighter. However, nothing can be perfect. Beer has a side effect. It makes your bladder fill up too fast. Soon, I needed to go to the bathroom. I asked where it was, and they pointed me to a door at the end of the hallway. I went there, but when I opened it, I was confronted by a couple doing their business. I immediately closed it again. This house was huge, and surely there was another bathroom, but I didn't think my bladder could take much more. So, I ran out of the house and opted FO. Nearest tree, I navigated through the throng, shoving aside anyone in my path with urgency until the back door came into view. I rushed outside, and once in the garden, I made a beeline for the first large tree, seeking refuge to carry out my intentions before time slipped away. As I settled behind the tree and began my task, piercing screams erupted from within the house. Initially, I dismissed them as mere antics from a drinking game or perhaps the start of a new round. Wet t-shirts caught my attention, but it was the screams that truly resonated. They weren't mere cries. They were rallying cries for a fight. I hastily adjusted my fly and dashed towards the house where Eric remained. Upon arrival, the scene unfolded before me. A chaotic brawl surrounded by a throng of spectators, their cheers amplifying the tension. In the midst of the uproar, two men exchanged heated insults while trading blows. Yet the cacophony made it nearly impossible to discern their individual voices. As I navigated through the throng, my thoughts were consumed by the unpredictable nature of Eric. His penchant for confrontation, especially when under the influence, made it all too likely he would find himself in trouble. My instincts proved correct. As I drew nearer, I could clearly see Eric locked in a fierce struggle with none other than Michael, the party host. Michael, a formidable figure standing nearly 6 feet 4 inches, had Eric pinned beneath him, his knees pressing down with force. My friend's biceps were flexed as he took punch after punch to the face, and I could see the significant wounds marring his features. It was clear that Eric had also dealt some damage, given the chaos unfolding before me. Seeing my friend in such distress ignited a primal instinct within me, and I rushed towards them, desperate to pull Michael away. But then, someone seized my shirt, yanking me backward and sending me crashing to the ground. I struggled to rise, but they held me down while that monstrous figure continued to unleash a brutal assault on my friend. I had never considered myself a fighter. In fact, I had never been in a fight before. Yet, in that moment, I found myself throwing punches and kicks at anyone who tried to stop me from helping my friend, who was clearly struggling. Just as the chaos escalated, the sound of a siren pierced the air, prompting everyone to flee. Michael dashed out of the house, eager to avoid arrest, finally freeing Eric. Instinctively, I felt the urge to run as well. But then I realized that my friend lay on the floor, and I rushed to him, determined to lift him and get him to safety. But when I reached him, I was taken aback. Eric was utterly unrecognizable. His face was grotesquely swollen and deeply lacerated from the brutal blows he had endured. He was barely conscious. I did my best to drape one of his arms over my shoulders, holding him steady while I carefully rolled his torso to secure him. With a heavy heart, I began to move at a painstakingly slow pace, cradling my friend as he lay there, outside the house. I was convinced we would inevitably get caught, but luck was on our side as the cops were preoccupied with a few kids they had apprehended fleeing through the garden. I dashed out the back door, and just in time, another college friend was about to escape in his car. Upon seeing us, he sped off, assisting me in getting Eric into the back of his truck. We all made our way to my apartment, and once we were safely inside, our friend helped me carry Eric and lay him down on the co. He was strongly urged to go to the hospital, yet he adamantly refused, insisting he was fine and that it was merely a few scratches. However, as I looked at him directly, I could see it was far more than that. His face was seriously injured, and he clearly needed medical attention. Despite this, he remained resolute in his decision, and being of sound mind, we couldn't compel him to seek help. So, we began to clean his face with towels and alcohol, administering a couple of painkillers to alleviate his discomfort. Once we had cleared away the blood, more of his injuries became visible. Clearly, the extent of the damage he had suffered left Eric truly unrecognizable, with wounds and swelling marring his features. Once again, I insisted he go to the doctor, but he flatly refused. Instead, he asked if I had a suture kit in my first aid supplies, and fortunately I did. I warned him that I didn't know how to suture, but to my surprise, Eric replied that he did. He limped to the bathroom and sutured his wounds himself. At that point, it was about 12:30 at night, still early, yet after confirming that Eric was safe, Gabriel, the kind soul who drove us to my apartment, headed home. I expressed my heartfelt gratitude for his generosity towards us and my friend. Eric, however, was adamant about returning to his place. After some back and forth, I managed to persuade him to stay at my apartment, emphasizing that he wasn't fit to be out on the streets, especially at that hour. I insisted he take my bed for a more comfortable night, while he remained in the living room, refusing to budge and opting instead for the sofa. Eric was incredibly obstinate, so I decided not to press the issue any further. At least he was safe in my apartment. The next morning, I woke up later than usual, likely due to the stress of the previous night. As I made my way to the living room, I noticed my friend still asleep. His face appeared quite worn, but otherwise, he seemed okay. I headed to the kitchen to brew some coffee when, out of nowhere, I heard. The door the knocks were very insistent, so I approached and asked who it was, fearing Michael might have come to seek revenge. But it was Gabriel, and he sounded very desperate. I opened the door quickly. He burst in and said in an alarmed voice, "Did you hear what happened?" Eric, who had been awakened by the knocking, and I looked at each other and then at Gabriel. Obviously, we told him we didn't know. Then he said, "Michael is dead." My friend and I were silent for a moment until I asked Gabriel what he was talking about. "What do you mean he's dead? How did that happen?" Gabriel continued, revealing that the maid at the beach house had discovered Michael's lifeless body that morning, sprawled on the couch and covered in blood. Someone had stabbed him 17 times while he slept, apparently with a butcher knife taken from the house's own kitchen, which had yet to be found. Now, everyone suspected that the killer was Eric. Gabriel mentioned that he had been trying to reach us all morning, but neither of us had answered our cell phones. I explained that mine was dead, and Eric's was likely the same. He fell in the house during the fight, and when we noticed this detail, we exchanged glances and fell silent. The presence of his phone was incriminating, yet we all understood that Eric wasn't the murderer. He had spent the night in my flat and hadn't gone anywhere. But who could have committed such an act? That was my immediate thought. Moments later, we heard the sound of a patrol car at the entrance of the building, and by then, it was evident to us all. We were informed of their arrival shortly after a knock echoed through my door. 2 police officers entered, taking Eric for questioning while Gabriel and I were called to provide our statements. To summarize, Michael's murder case presented a complex puzzle for the police, as Eric was their primary suspect. However, he maintained a solid alibi, and aside from the blood on his shirt and the phone found in the house, clearly linked to the altercation, no substantial evidence emerged to implicate him beyond his confrontation with Michael. That night, they failed to uncover the murder weapon, and after questioning numerous individuals at the camps, they were left with little to show for their efforts. No one seemed to have any clue about who could commit such a heinous act. Eventually, the case went cold, shrouded in mystery for 7 long years until the truth emerged, chilling everyone to the bone. By that time, I had graduated, moved away, and lost contact with my former college friends, including Eric and Gabriel. One day, while sorting through a stack of papers, I received an unexpected call from Gabriel, someone I hadn't spoken to in about 2 years. I answered and greeted him with an enthusiastic, "Hey bro," curious about this pleasant surprise. He simply asked, "Have you seen the news?" At that moment, I was at a loss for words because I typically don't keep up with the news. I admitted I had no idea what he was referring to. He then sent me a link to my phone, and when I opened it, I was utterly stunned. It led to a local newscast from our hometown, and in it the anchorwoman would have been announcing that at last, one of the most shocking unsolved crimes in the city had been resolved: Michael's case. It appears that just before a neighbor of the beach house, where the tragic event took place, discovered a butcher knife buried in his garden, wrapped in a plastic bag, while tending to his plants. Naturally, the man contacted the police, who confirmed that it was the weapon used to end Michael's life. Following a laboratory analysis, they uncovered that it bore Eric's fingerprints along with traces of his own blood. He was subsequently apprehended and ultimately confessed to the crime. I must admit that when I received the news, I was utterly astonished. I could hardly comprehend what I was witnessing and hearing at that moment. Eric revealed that it was around 2 a.m. After I went to sleep, he took the keys to my apartment, opened the door, and walked to Michael's house, which was not far away. According to him, his intention was to retrieve his cell phone. Luckily for him, the back door of the house was unlocked. So he took advantage of the situation and went inside, thinking it would be empty. But when he entered the living room, he found Michael sleeping soundly on the couch, probably too drunk to realize there was an intruder. It was then that he remembered. Anger surged within him, particularly when he caught sight of his reflection, revealing the severe damage that would leave permanent scars. Consumed by rage, he stormed into the kitchen, seizing the largest knife available, and charged at Michael, who was utterly defenseless after his confession. Following this act, Eric was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. This reality struck me profoundly, as I had never envisioned my friend being capable of such a horrific act. It brought to mind the understanding that we can never truly know someone in their entirety, and that each person harbors a shadowy aspect. Yet, it brings me comfort to acknowledge that justice has finally been served. For my eldest son's 10th birthday, my wife and I decided to host a celebration in our backyard. We set up some tables, played a bit of music, prepared food, and ensured there was ample space for the kids to enjoy themselves. Living in a rural area, we were fortunate to have a large forest bordering our home, providing plenty of room for play. As is tradition, we invited the entire family along with our closest friends and neighbors, filling our home with warmth and laughter. As is often the case during family gatherings, the celebration continued into the night. By then, Most of our guests had departed, leaving only our relatives and neighbors lingering a bit longer. However, the mosquitoes began to make their presence felt, prompting me to retreat to the small wooden shed I had constructed on the far side of the yard, adjacent to the woods. Inside, I kept some mosquito repellents that emit smoke when lit, effectively keeping the pests at bay. Though the name escaped, and set them on the grass, but just as I was about to ignite them, I recalled that I hadn't brought the matches. So, I retraced my steps to the shed to retrieve them. While rummaging through the shed for the matches, I suddenly became aware of footsteps in the woods. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, as if something substantial was approaching. I paused, straining to listen more intently, but the music and the laughter of the children made it difficult to discern. I stepped outside to investigate, yet found nothing amiss. Then, I wondered if I'd simply misinterpreted the sounds amidst the chaos. The sounds all around were overwhelming, yet I found it quite simple to return to my companions. I finally activated the mosquito repellent, but to ensure a more tranquil atmosphere, I also set up a couple of light bulbs nearby for when the clock struck 10 p.m. Most of our guests had already departed, yet around 6 children remained at the gathering, while their parents continued to engage in conversation. The reality was that we were enjoying ourselves immensely, but then the children expressed their desire to play hide-and-seek in the forest. Typically, this area is quite serene, so we perceived no immediate threat and we allowed the children to play, cautioning them to remain close to the garden. As we engaged in conversation, the sounds of their laughter and joy echoed through the forest. Suddenly, those joyful screams transformed into genuine cries of terror, accompanied by the thunderous sound of a stampede. Instantly, we leapt from our seats and rushed towards the source of the commotion. The children began to shout that a monster had taken William, my neighbor's 6-year-old son. In that moment, we all began sprinting towards the forest, but the rapid unfolding of events left me without my flashlight, forcing me to navigate in near darkness. To complicate matters, my gun was also out of reach. Thankfully, my brother acted quickly, catching up to me with a flashlight and the shotgun I had searched for in the shed. It was a dire predicament, and even from a distance, the screams of my neighbor echoed in the air, a testament to the panic that gripped him, and rightly so. As the women took the children were ushered into the house for their safety, while the 4 men in the party, 2 neighbors, my brother, and I, continued our search through the forest in every direction. The captor had a significant head start on us. At that moment, I felt a wave of frustration for not having taken the footsteps I heard in the shed more seriously. That individual had been lurking nearby since the early hours, biding his time for the chance to snatch the little one, if anything were to happen to them. The child I could not forgive myself. As we frantically dashed through the forest searching for any sign of William, we started to hear the boy's screams, which pierced the air intermittently like moo. Pulled by his captor's hand, as they fled in terror, we immediately began to yell and shout. Then I paused and fired 2 shots into the sky to instill fear in the captor. It was at that moment we heard the little boy's voice rise above the chaos, calling for his parents. We hurried towards the direction of his cries, which echoed from a considerable distance. Then we concentrated on. We ventured into the darkness with our flashlights, and that's when we spotted a figure clutching a child in his arms, sprinting deep into the forest. The man was tall, clad in a black sweatshirt. I aimed my gun at him, but it felt impossible to pull the trigger with the child in his grasp. Instead, I fired a shot into the air, hoping to signal our proximity. My brother joined in, firing a couple of shots and shouting for him to stop. In that moment, he released the child and vanished into the shadows of the forest. The moment Willie's father dashed towards him, enveloping him in a protective embrace, we unleashed a barrage of gunfire in the direction of the assailant. Despite our efforts, we failed to land a shot and soon lost sight of him entirely. The realization that we had completely lost the trail filled me with a profound sense of helplessness. It was hard to fathom how close we had come to apprehending that monster, only to have him slip through our fingers. Equally unsettling was the thought of how narrowly we had avoided losing Willie, leaving me to wonder about the intentions of that man and what he might have wanted with the child. As we made our way back home with William, we ran. We encountered a group of policemen along the way, and it appeared our wives had already alerted the authorities. Once the boy was safe, we returned to the forest with them to resume the search. But it proved futile. The guy had vanished. This was the first occurrence of such an event in our community, and the most unsettling part was our complete lack of knowledge about who this person might be. Upon returning home, we found a crowd gathered in our yard. All the neighbors had come over to see W. Was utterly consumed by fear, much like we had been. As the months dragged on, the investigation seemed to stall. The police were unable to locate the man, and our description was frustratingly imprecise. We could only recall that he was a large figure wearing a hooded sweatshirt. Then, out of the blue, we received the call we had been anxiously anticipating. The police had finally apprehended the perpetrator after he attempted a similar act in a nearby town, but this time he was caught. What FO? There was something utterly chilling that sent shivers down our spines. A dangerous criminal with a long history of kidnapping and sexual abuse of minors. While we had already suspected that this person's intentions were far from good, hearing the police confirm our fears was a profound shock. It made us acutely aware of how close this predator was to our children and how narrowly little William escaped becoming one of his victims. This harrowing experience left us shaken. It marked a significant turning point in our lives. Since that moment, we have become exceedingly cautious with our children, ensuring they never venture alone into the woods again. The tale I am about to share took place when I was 19 years old. At that time, a group of friends invited me to a private gathering at the home of a third-year student. Having just started college, it felt like a perfect chance to mingle, make connections, and enjoy myself for a bit. I arrived at the party around 10 p.m., surrounded by a vast expanse of land. However, as I approached, a sense of confusion washed over me. The place felt eerily empty. The door was shut tight, and there was no music to be heard. I glanced at my friends, my expression mirroring my bewilderment, and they, just as inexperienced in this college party scene, shared my confusion. Then Albin, the one who had invited us, broke the silence. The invitation instructed the host, who advised us to knock on the door and present our invitation. Once inside, someone would direct us to the appropriate location. We followed his instructions, knocking on the door, and a man opened it for us. We showed him our invitations, and he indicated where we should go. I felt a bit confused because, upon entering the house, it appeared to be a perfectly ordinary residence, beautiful and luxurious, yet entirely devoid of life. Not even a hint of music filled the air. In that instant, a wave of unease washed over me as a chaotic thought flickered through my mind. What if we were kidnapped by a mafia involved in human or organ trafficking? Trapped in a bunker or one of those clandestine labs where unspeakable horrors unfold? It felt like something straight out of countless crime documentaries. Yet, the man guided us towards a door at the end of the hallway. As we opened it, music filled the air, and we noticed a set of stairs leading down, which we began to descend. The music swelled, and we soon discovered that the party was unfolding in a basement. I must admit, the venue was incredible. The decor was stunning, and the atmosphere was electric, filled with a lively crowd. My friends and I quickly made our way to the bar, ordered drinks, and began to soak in the festivities. After about 15 minutes, my friend started to flirt with a couple of girls, and I chose to give them some space, settling myself beside the bar. It was then that I glanced toward the corn. As soon as I caught sight of a stunning girl, her gaze locked onto mine without wavering. She was tall, with fair skin, dressed in a crisp white shirt and a black pleated miniskirt, her long purple hair giving her an unmistakable anime vibe. I couldn't help but smile and offer a greeting, but she simply smiled back, her eyes still fixed on me. At one point, I glanced over at my classmates, who were clearly enjoying themselves with some girls nearby, prompting me to remain where I was. When I turned back to the corner, I noticed this girl continued to gaze at me with an intensity that was hard to ignore. I smiled at her once more, and she returned the gesture. We held each other's gaze for a while, and there was something undeniably magnetic about her eyes. At one point, I found myself completely captivated by those dark eyes from across the room, as if everything else had faded away. Suddenly, she beckoned me closer with a subtle motion of her hand, and I began to walk towards her. But then she started to circle the room, clearly inviting me to follow, and so I did, as she moved through the living space. She moved through the room and headed for the stairs, prompting me to follow her. I wondered if she was inviting me into some sort of game, so I trailed behind, curious about her destination. Ascending the stairs, she opened a door and emerged from the basement. At that moment, I was halfway up, and I caught a glimpse of my friends still enjoying themselves in the living room. I thought, why not see where the night leads? I completed my ascent, opened the door, and peeked into the hallway. There she was, waiting for me. I smiled at her and asked, "Where are you taking me, beautiful? At least tell me your name." She returned my smile flirtatiously and replied, "Alice. My name is Alice." "What's yours?" "Javier," I told her. Then, in that alluring tone that women master so effortlessly, she said, "Come with me, Javier." As she continued walking down the corridor, I noticed it was no longer empty. People were smoking and chatting, and couples were being affectionate. I saw nothing wrong in playing along with the moment. My enigmatic companion and I continued our stroll until I arrived at the staircase, which I presumed led to the rooms. I could hardly believe my fortune. While it wasn't the first occasion I had been inspired to engage in mischief with a perfect stranger, it was certainly the first time I found myself doing so in a mansion of this grandeur. We ascended to the second floor, where she guided me down a hallway lined with several doors. At the end, she stepped into the room on her left, leaving the door ajar for me to follow. The space was vast and stunning, featuring a large. The balcony featured panoramic windows that stood open, allowing a gentle breeze to flow through the curtains. It was unmistakably a girl's room, adorned with various purple accents that made it easy to deduce its owner. I posed the question, but she remained silent, her gaze fixed on the balcony. I lingered behind her, anticipating the next move, but what unfolded took me completely by surprise. In an instant, the girl dashed forward and flung the curtains aside, revealing. What she was attempting to do compelled me to sprint after her with all my might, desperate to intervene. Yet, as we reached the balcony's edge, she leaped without hesitation. Instinctively, I reached out to catch her, hoping to suspend her in midair and prevent her descent. But my efforts were futile. The force of my own momentum caused me to lose my footing. In that fleeting moment, I understood that I was about to plunge into the abyss as well. Just then, I felt a grip on my shirt, yanking me backward with tremendous force. As I tumbled violently backwards over the balcony, I landed on the floor, still shaken and bewildered by the chaos that had just unfolded. It was then that I heard Hector's frantic voice calling out to me, demanding to know what I was thinking, questioning my sanity, and asking what I had consumed. But all that occupied my mind was the image of that girl leaping from the balcony. I needed to get help, and all I could manage to tell my friend was to call an ambulance. With that urgency driving me, I sprang up from the floor and rushed back to the balcony to see what had happened. What had transpired with her prompted me to glance outside right away. Yet there was nothing. No one on the floor, no people, no screams, nothing at all. I was utterly perplexed, unable to grasp the situation. I turned to Hector, who was staring at me as if I had sprouted a horn from my forehead, and inquired about the girl. He continued to look at me as if I had lost my mind and replied, "What girl?" I pointed out the one who just jumped off the balcony. My friend, already on the verge of losing his temper, insisted that the only insane person in this scenario was me. I attempted to leap from the balcony, but I maintained that it wasn't me. I hurriedly described the girl and recounted everything that had transpired in the last hour, from spotting her in the corner to trailing her down the hallway, up the stairs, and finally to that moment when, out of nowhere, she dashed onto the balcony and jumped. As I relayed this to her, Hector shook his head, gazing at me as if I had lost my mind. When I concluded my tale, my friend inquired about what I had been drinking, to which I responded that it was merely a glass. After a few drinks, he jokingly mentioned that someone had tampered with my beer. That's when he started to share how he had been keeping an eye on me since he spotted me wandering through the living room. He noticed when I headed upstairs to leave and tried to call out to me, but he figured the music was too loud for me to hear him. Instead, he just kept staring ahead. However, when he saw me open the door, he decided to come after me. As he emerged from the basement, he caught sight of me walking alone towards the stairs and called out to me. Once more, I found myself in a situation where he claimed to have heard me mumbling a few things, as if I were conversing with someone. When he noticed me making my way towards the rooms, he chose to trail behind, curious about what was troubling me. It was then that he witnessed me entering that room. As he peeked in to inquire about my presence, he saw me darting towards the balcony, shouting no at the top of my lungs. In a rush, he followed me, managing to grab my shirt just as I was about to tumble off the edge. There was never any girl. Upon hearing this account from my friend, I walked back to the balcony and looked down just to confirm that there was no one there. Then I looked at him and assured him that it had not been a hallucination. I was not under the effects of any substance either. I had experimented with those things before and knew exactly how it felt, and this was not the case. I was completely sober at that moment, except for a couple of beers. After this, we went back to the basement and told Albin what happened. The following day at the university, we began discussing the incident, and soon one of our classmates joined in, followed by another. Before we knew it, the whole situation had turned into gossip. About a week passed, and just as I was starting to move on, one of our classmates approached us with an intriguing revelation. We all turned to her, curiosity piqued, unsure of what she was about to share. It was then that she revealed that the girl I had seen was indeed real. She was the eldest daughter of the previous owners of that mansion where she had ended her life by leaping from the balcony 6 years prior. And I was not the first to witness her, but the first to whom she spoke and led to that place. It goes without saying that this remains the most unsettling experience I have ever encountered. It is not a thought that occupies my mind daily, yet occasionally that incident resurfaces and it still feels like a haunting nightmare. A decade ago, I secured a position with a construction company, but in the administration office of that company, there were just 3 of us, Carmen, Aurora, and myself. From the very first day, I found myself getting along splendidly with my coworkers, particularly with Carmen. At 35, she was tall, dark, and strikingly beautiful, the kind of woman who turned heads as she walked down the street. Yet, beyond her looks, she was an exceptional worker and a wonderful friend, known for her humor and charisma. However, she was also navigating a number of personal challenges. During that period, she faced significant challenges as she navigated a profound crisis in her marriage. Her husband, Rene, exhibited extreme jealousy, narcissism, violence, and control. I often found myself questioning why someone like her would be involved with a man like him. Although she rarely discussed it and never openly acknowledged it, I was convinced that he physically abused her. I was aware of the verbal and psychological abuse, not because she confided in me, but because I witnessed several instances where he displayed alarming behavior. Her aggressive behavior raised significant concern for both Aurora and me. As we had both endured abusive relationships in the past, we recognized that kind of behavior all too well, understanding that violent individuals rarely change for the better. In fact, such situations often escalate. The longer you remain close to someone like that, the more perilous it becomes. As I mentioned, Carmen was an exceptionally beautiful woman, which made some of our worries all the more understandable. Companions became intrigued by her, yet she remained indifferent to anyone. This dynamic shifted with the arrival of Franklin, the new personnel supervisor. Franklin was not only kind, but also strikingly handsome and gentle. From the moment he stepped into the office, his interest in Carmen was apparent. However, being colleagues, he maintained his decorum, fully aware of her marriage and child. Despite Carmen's initial evasiveness and her claims of disinterest, the reality was that gradually, little by little, her feelings began to change. A subtle connection was blossoming between them, yet this was a secret known only to Aurora and me. No one else was aware, especially not Carmen, who was married. If Renee discovered the budding romance between her and Franklin, the consequences were unpredictable. This situation weighed heavily on my mind, as Carmen seemed to overlook Renee's possessive and volatile tendencies. She justified it by claiming he merely had a bad temper and wasn't always like that, insisting he treated her well during the rare moments of calm. On several occasions, when I brought up the idea of divorcing him and officially pursuing a relationship with Franklin, she simply responded that she couldn't. Renee was the father of her son and her husband before God, and she believed that, eventually, things between them would resolve themselves. I was convinced that they wouldn't. On the contrary, this was a potentially perilous situation, and perhaps she was more cognizant of that than she was willing to acknowledge. It might have been this very awareness that held her back from fully separating from Renee. As for Franklin, he was single, and to our knowledge, he did not have a girlfriend. However, he had expressed his interest in pursuing a serious relationship with Carmen on multiple occasions, as he was genuinely falling for her. This romance between my coworkers remained under wraps for several months. Eventually, after enduring several altercations where her husband physically assaulted her, Carmen made the decision to file for divorce. At that moment, Aurora and I felt a sense of happiness for her. We recognized that she truly deserved much better than what she had been experiencing. Scoundrel, yet the journey ahead was fraught with challenges. Renee was utterly resistant to the idea of separation. He resorted to the familiar tactics of abusers, promising change, insisting it wouldn't happen again, urging her to think of their son, and vowing to fight for their marriage. However, Carmen stood firm, making it clear that there was no way back. Despite his persistence, in a moment of honesty, Carmen revealed that she had found someone else. As one might expect, this revelation was anything but easy for him to accept. Renee handled the situation surprisingly well, and the following day in the office, she shared that he had accepted it. He told her that if she was already with someone else, he would step back and let her live that relationship. When she relayed this to us, Aurora and I exchanged glances and simultaneously remarked that it was strange. We speculated that perhaps he had finally come to his senses and opted for a peaceful separation, but we couldn't have been more mistaken. Carmen and Renee finally parted ways, and everything appeared to unfold smoothly. He moved out, leaving her to stay in the house with her son. Although she had begun a formal relationship with Franklin, this time she opted for a more measured approach. Quite a wise decision after enduring years alongside an abusive partner. A couple of months passed, and the Christmas season approached. Each year, the company organized a grand celebration to mark the holidays, an event we eagerly anticipated. With immense excitement, as the company consistently treated us to gifts and bonuses. This time, we had the added joy of bringing our partners, allowing us to celebrate together after a challenging year of hard work. Our boss made a special reservation at a well-known pub restaurant in town, a suggestion we had made since it was a favorite hangout spot for us. It truly was a fantastic venue for a celebration. On that day, we all arrived punctually and dressed to impress, ready to enjoy the festy. We arrived at our destination, and the atmosphere quickly transformed into one of joy and camaraderie. Laughter echoed as we shared jokes, enjoyed a few drinks, and even took to the stage for karaoke. The night was truly delightful, and just when we thought it couldn't get any better, our boss made a thrilling announcement. Due to the impressive profits we had achieved over the year, he would be increasing our salaries by 15%. The room erupted in applause and celebration. To add to the excitement, that evening, Carmen and Franklin chose to reveal their relationship to all of us, a secret they had kept under wraps until now. In a corporate setting, the only individuals privy to the situation were Aurora and myself. Thankfully, perhaps due to the festive atmosphere or the drinks, the news was received positively by everyone, including our boss, who offered his blessing and expressed hopes for their continued happiness together. recognizing them as outstanding employees. He anticipated that their performance would remain strong in the coming year. However, this delightful and celebratory evening was on the brink of taking a rather alarming turn as the clock struck 2:00 a.m. As the evening drew to a close, there was a palpable reluctance among us to part ways, our spirits still high from the celebration. At that moment, Franklin and two of his friends opted to step outside for a cigarette, marking their third trip of the night. Meanwhile, Carmen, Aurora, and I made our way to the bathroom to freshen up our makeup. After such a delightful time, we certainly needed it. We entered the bathroom, laughter and jokes spilling from our lips, when suddenly we were interrupted. Amidst the chaos, voices clashed from the parking lot, drawing our attention. We exchanged surprised glances and felt compelled to investigate. As we stepped outside, the scene unfolded before us. Renee and Franklin were locked in a fierce confrontation, the asphalt their battleground. The other two of us stood by, rallying behind Franklin, urging him on. Just as we made a move to intervene, we were halted by onlookers who insisted this was a matter of pride, a man-to-man fight they had chosen. It was hard to fathom. Were we truly witnessing this spectacle unfold? At one point, the alcohol was clearly impacting their judgment. Carmen erupted in a fit of rage, demanding that Renee leave her alone for good. This only fueled his anger further. In a moment of chaos, he managed to overpower Franklin, pinning him down and unleashing a brutal assault. However, Franklin quickly regained his composure, flipping the situation and leaving him on top of Renee, delivering punches to his face until he could no longer maintain his stance. Meanwhile, Carmen berated him, insisting he was acting foolishly. I found no humor in their street brawl, resembling a pair of fools. The other man, however, began to cheer for Franklin, patting him on the back amidst their drunken antics. It was a ridiculous scene, typical of that hour. Meanwhile, Renee rose from the ground and approached his car. I assumed he was about to drive away, but instead, he retrieved a gun, strode over to Franklin, and aimed it at him. He pulled the trigger repeatedly until the gun was empty. It unfolded in an instant, as we all stood frozen, hands clamped over our ears, paralyzed by fear and helplessness. We witnessed that despicable act. The moment Franklin's life was cruelly snatched away, leaving Carmen bereft of the chance for genuine happiness. In the wake of such a cowardly deed, Renee dashed to his car, desperate to flee. But just then, the police arrived, alerted by the bar owners about the escalating fight. In a surge of panic, we all began shouting for them to apprehend. That night ended in a devastating sentence of 35 years for what Franklin had inflicted upon him. Yet no punishment could ease Carmen's anguish. She was utterly shattered by the tragedy. In the aftermath of this dreadful event, our boss chose to bring in a substitute, allowing Carmen the space to heal from her loss. However, true to her responsible and diligent nature, she only took 5 days off. Carmen expressed that she needed to stay busy to prevent the haunting memories of that night from replaying in her mind, tormenting her at every turn. Since the events of that terrifying night, a decade has slipped by. It took Carmen over 5 years to embrace love once more, but she eventually found a wonderful man, remarried, and welcomed a beautiful baby girl into her life. This journey has shown me that life is full of surprises. A night that could have been among the happiest and most delightful turned into one of the most frightening and regrettable memories I hold. I hope your day is filled with health and joy. I invite you to subscribe to my channel to hear true horror stories. Hello, and see you again.